everyone, and most of you I have seen already. Let me tell you about my friend Wayne. Dr. Wayne Topping will be presenting from Great Harwood, just north of Manchester in the United Kingdom today. Wayne is a New Zealander with a doctorate in geology from Victoria University in Wellington, New Zealand. It was while teaching geology in Pasadena that he was introduced to Touch for Health. He became so intrigued that he became a Touch for Health instructor in 1977. That opened up an interest in holistic health and the decision to become a biokinesiology instructor in 1980. For 30 years, Dr. Topping had a home base in Bellingham, Washington, where he taught extensively within the United States and throughout 23 countries. In the late 1990s, Wayne founded Wellness Kinesiology, and he has since developed 26 seminars covering a broad range of topics. In the year 2000, Dr. Topping became one of the 3 IKC Touch for Health faculty for the United States. In 2010, Wayne relocated to the United Kingdom to get married and to establish the Wellness Kinesiology Institute. Wayne is currently IKC faculty for Russia, the Ukraine, and Hungary. He has served on the IKC's Touch for Health School Board and has been on the Personal Development School Board since its inception in 2009. Currently, he is one of 6 faculty members working on upgrading the Touch for Health manuals. And when he has time, he still loves being in the mountains or collecting rocks and fossils. Today, Wayne is speaking about his course, Sensitivities and Allergies. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Wayne.
Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you for the introduction. So today we're going to be talking about sensitivities and allergies. This is a 2-day class. That's a more advanced class. Now I'll start out with my training in biokinesiology that finished in 1981. And I moved up to Bellingham, which is just below the Canadian border. And at that time, there was a ski to sea race. And so I decided I was recruited to be the downhill runner. For that particular race, we started out with a cross-country skier, a downhill skier. Then I ran down this side of the mountain for 8 miles, gave the medallion over to a cyclist who went 42 miles, then a canoeist down the river, cross-country cyclist, then a kayaking across to the Bellingham Bay. So that whole race took about 8 hours. And I was doing this portion here, running down the side of the mountain. So here I was, middle of winter, running, and unfortunately what happened, I was running on a cold day. Towards the end of the run, I had my mouth open. So by the time I finished my run, I realized I had a cold on the way because I had a sore throat, which was a little bit crazy. So I loaded up on vitamin C because we know that when you have a sore throat, you load up on vitamin C, right? Well, in my case, the throat didn't resolve itself. In fact, the sore throat became worse. So then I got into one of the books that John Barton had written on allergies, and I discovered that I was allergic to vitamin C, and then I checked the particular tissue that was out of balance. And John had a number of muscles and tendons that can be out of balance when you're allergic to vitamin C. What was out for me was something here called the trachea circular number 4. So it's interesting because the symptom is a sore throat, and at the same time I had the sore throat, I was taking vitamin C to correct it, but I was allergic to vitamin C. And once I realized that, I then worked on the emotions. As soon as I worked on the emotions, sore throat disappeared and the allergy to vitamin C was gone. So that was my first real application to John's work working with allergies. Now, a number of years later, probably about 1984, 1985, I had a unique experience. I've only worked on people with allergies to iodine maybe about 4 or 5 times, but I had 2 people both in the same week. One had gone to a medical doctor. The medical doctor told this patient, look, you're very deficient in iodine. You need to take this. and that should correct the problem. Person took that supplement and ended up in the emergency room at the local hospital. The same week, and a person went to a naturopath. He was told, you're very allergic to iodine, you need to take this, that should correct the problem. He ended up in the emergency room at the hospital. Same week, they both didn't know each other. They both found me. I worked with them. They were sensitive to iodine and corrected. And so obviously the universe was telling me, you need to know this basic principle, that sometimes when people are deficient in something, it's not because it's not in the diet, it's because they're sensitive or allergic to it, so their body can't handle it, which then deepens or creates the deficiency. Now, why else are allergies important? Well, if someone comes to me with gastrointestinal problems, first thing I'm going to ask is, are they under a lot of stress? Because if they're under a lot of stress, it could be that the stress is just shutting down the digestive system, which is why they have the indigestion or cramping. Now, it could be that they don't have enough hydrochloric acid, they don't have enough digestive enzymes, so it could be have a biological relationship like that. But another possibility is it could be caused by an allergy. And so those would be the three major things I'd look at if someone came to me with gastrointestinal problems, and one of those considerations is an allergy to something. Now, another consideration is that allergies can cause almost any symptom you care to name, and we'll get into why that is a little bit later on. When a client comes to me with aches and pains, I can balance them out physically, as in Touch for Health, but I have to also be aware that sometimes those aches and pains are symptoms of allergies. And once I track down the allergy, I can balance out tissues, muscles, and tendons to eliminate pain. And I'll give you an example of that as well. And we can also look at allergies when everything else fails. We tried everything else, we're scratching our head, we don't know what else to do. Consider that it might be a result of an allergy, track down the allergy, correct it to solve the problem. Now, the term allergy was coined in 1906 by an Austrian medical doctor. And at the time he defined it, he took the two Greek words, which meant altered sense reactivity. And at that time, allergy was a lot broader than is now recognized by medicine. It included the things that obviously affected the immune system, but things that did not affect the immune system. But in 1925, the European and the British allergists got together and they put pressure on the American allergists and said, look, we're going to redefine allergies. And so they created a more limited view of what allergies are from a medical perspective. Medically, an allergy only exists if you can prove that there's an involvement with the immune system. And that's not so. Originally, there's sensitivities and things that affect the immune system. So we're looking at a broader field than is looked at within medicine. Now, if we look at the symptoms of allergies, if you eat a meal and then immediately your skin breaks out as a rash, or you have hives or eczema, or you have itching, you make an association between the meal you just ate and the skin-related symptomology, and you identify that as most likely an allergen. Sometimes people eat a meal and they immediately get stomach cramping, indigestion, or more severely, maybe diarrhea. And so if you have gut-related problems, that immediately tells you you're likely to have eaten something that you're allergic to. Sometimes it's the airways, the respiratory system that gives you the symptomology, such as sneezing, stuffy nose, hay fever, asthma. Now, if you have symptoms associated with skin, gut, and airways, that tells you the allergy is probably related to immunoglobulin E, the IgE. That's because you have an immediate reaction, and the reaction occurred in those three areas: skin, gastrointestinal tract, or airways. The symptoms don't involve other parts of the body because there wasn't enough time for the allergen to get to other parts of the body. And for that reason, because the reaction is pretty much straight away, we often make the association. We drank some wine and the skin broke out, so we got the connection between the two. So a lot of people know those sorts of allergies. However, there's other types of allergens. And there's one that's called a delayed onset allergy, which is IgG, also referred to as intolerances. Now that one, people have these intolerances, but they usually don't know that they have them. Why not? Because it's due to quantity and frequency. So if I ate a whole lot of cheese on one particular day, then I increase the chance I might have an allergic reaction the following day. But if I ate a small amount of cheese one day, some more cheese 3 days later, and 2 weeks later, I might not ever know that I have an allergy to it because I just didn't overwhelm the system in terms of quantity or frequency. Now, the symptoms occur only after you've got a certain amount of the allergen within the system. And that's why the symptoms are delayed. They can start maybe 2 hours after the initial eating of the product, but the symptoms could occur maybe 5 or even 8 days later. So you get a migraine, but you don't associate the migraine with the food that you ate quite a lot of 4 and 5 days earlier. So people often don't make the connection. And what's even more challenging is sometimes these IgG allergens are foods that are favorite foods that you have in your diet all the time, that you crave and you think are wonderful foods because they give you energy. But these ones could actually be the IgG allergens without you recognizing it. Now, in this category, we have over 100 allergic symptoms have been recognized, over 100 medical diseases and conditions. And when you look at them, they can include things like anxiety. So you might be doing phobia corrections with clients and really not correcting the problem because it doesn't have an energetic or emotional origin. It could be the result of a food allergy, an IgG allergy. When people have ADHD or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or autism, they often have sensitivities to milk and gluten products. Diabetes type 1, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, when people have migraine or cluster headaches, inflammatory bowel conditions such as Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, irritable bowel syndrome, rheumatoid arthritis, sleep disorders such as insomnia, sleep apnea, snoring, all these things can all be related to allergens. But most people don't tend to think of allergies being a possible cause for such problems. So I'm just letting you know that. So if you try lots of other balancing techniques and they don't work for any of these chronic conditions, allergy is also a possibility. Now, I said before that sometimes when you balance for an allergen, to balance it so the person can handle the particular substance, you'll also get rid of aches and pains. So let me illustrate that with an example. Many years ago, I was invited across the East Coast of the United States when I was living in the States. A therapist had a lot of clients and she couldn't get any further with them. So said, look, why don't you come on over and work with my clients because I'm stuck. I don't know how to make further progress. So that's why I was there. And I was staying in a particular place and I offered to balance the woman who was running the hostess in the house in exchange for accommodation. So I said to her, what are your major issues? What would you like me to balance you for? And she said, well, I've got tailbone pain, but I've got dairy allergy as well. So those are my two major problems. So I said, okay, let's assume we only have a chance to balance one of these because they may not be related. Which one's more important? And she said, well, the dairy allergy, because I've been allergic to dairy products for decades, many, many years. Tailbone pain has only been there for about 3 weeks. So I said, that's fine. So then I started going through the different muscles and tendons I know can be out of balance when people are allergic to dairy products. And I found 2 or 3, but the top priority one was this small muscle here that's called coccygeus extensor. Now, coccygeus extensor, as the name implies, is on the back side, the posterior side of the tailbone, and extends the tailbone. So when that muscle goes into contraction, that actually pulls the tailbone back. And when you find, among the symptoms, you find tailbone pains, which is what she had, malalignment of the tailbone bent forward too far. So here we're working with a particular tissue, a muscle that's associated with allergy to milk products, but in finding that particular muscle that we need to balance, we also found the muscle that was out of balance causing her tailbone pain. So we worked on the emotions, After we finished working on the emotions, the tailbone pain was gone, and she was so excited because she bounced up and down the side of her bed, and she was so impressed. She went across to her husband's bedroom, woke him up, and showed that she could now bounce up and down on her tailbone. But the point was, here I was working with an allergy to dairy products. I didn't know it at first, but that was also causing the tailbone pain. So once we bounced out the allergen, it corrected both conditions. I said before that the IgG allergens are difficult to recognize because a lot of times they're people's favorite foods. So if I'm working with a client and I want to find out what their allergies might be, I'll ask them two major questions. I'll say, what foods do you hate? And what foods do you love? What foods do you crave? Because the foods that they love and crave, a lot of times it'll be bread, for example. A lot of times they're actually allergic to and addicted to those foods. And if they don't eat them, they go into withdrawal symptoms and then they get re-addicted to it, and you've got an allergy addiction cycle going. However, there are other foods that people have avoided pretty much all their life. And those are often allergies that go back to early childhood. So I'll give you an example. Here's a case of a 15-month-old girl. I won't mention her name, but her parents were top kinesiologists. On this occasion, she's eating a meal with her parents. The meal contains potatoes, onions, cheese, and kelp. So a rather Spartan meal. Now, potato is normally her favorite food, but on this particular occasion, she's avoiding the potato, which the parents think is a little bit unusual. Instead, what she's doing is reaching for the raw onion on her father's plate and eating that. So they did muscle testing. They found out two things. One is she's temporarily allergic to her favorite food, the potato. And if she eats the onion, that provides the body with the nutrition to put the body into balance so she can then handle the potato. And she's 15 months old. She knows nothing academically about any of this, but she's instinctively, innately, intuitively reaching for the food that's going to help balance the system. And she also knew to avoid the potatoes, her favorite food, on an occasion when she could not handle it. So they've done studies where if people haven't been on highly sugared, highly salted food early on, but are exposed to lots of different foods, and the children are allowed to self-select. They generally will select foods that the body wants and avoid foods that they can't handle. So when I ask a person, what foods do you hate? Lots of times these are foods that they didn't like in early childhood, and they've gone through life avoiding a food because they know it's not good for them. Now, let's show you the approach we take, because sometimes we work with individual allergens, such as I showed you, like dairy products, tracking down specific tissue and balancing that out. But what happens if we have someone that has lots and lots of allergies? This is a possibility. There's a relationship between the adrenals and the immune system. So here we have a seesaw or teeter-totter, adrenal function on this end, and we have the immune system on this end. At this time, they're both in balance. Now, if we are under stress, the seesaw goes in this manner. The adrenals start overworking as they pump out adrenaline, and your glucose gets, blood sugar, glycogen gets converted into glucose, so you have lots of energy available to deal with the emergency. Now, at the same time, adrenaline is being pumped out. We have other adrenal hormones pumped out, including cortisol. One of the things cortisol does, it shuts down part of the immune system, so that temporarily when you're in a stressful situation, you don't have the allergic responses. Now, that's for survival. The reason for that is because if I was allergic to dust and I'm in an emergency situation, I might sneeze because of the dust. When I sneeze, my eyes are closed, and that does not increase my chance for surviving. And so that's probably why part of the reason that the immune system or part of it is shut down when the adrenals are going into overdrive to handle the emergency situation. Now, if the situation is just temporary, then the adrenals go back down into balance and the immune system goes back up into balance. However, if we're dealing with a chronic situation, so the adrenals have been overworking and eventually become fatigued, Then we have weak adrenal function, and the other end of the seesaw flips up into an overactive stage or state, and you can now have the body reacting to pollens and animal hair and maybe even autoimmune conditions that would not be normal, but are created because of this overactivity here. Now, you might be tempted to go in and deal with these numerous allergies, this end of the seesaw, but you can see from this model, the real problem is the adrenal function. The adrenals are being overworked, and so what we have to do is deal with what's causing the adrenal stress and bring the adrenals back up into proper balance nutritionally. Now, if we look in the Touch for Health book, and I'm taking the 1994 version put out by John Thie, the muscles we use in Touch for Health include sartorius, gracilis, soleus, and gastrocnemius. And I've highlighted one word that appears in each of those: allergies, 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 allergies. So that's in your Touch for Health book. And hives, which is related to allergies. So Touch for Health, although most people don't always read that material, in the Touch for Health book, it tells us these muscles associated with adrenal function, when they're weak, will often have symptoms that are indicative of the other end of the seesaw being out of balance, which is the allergies. And the major nutrition that we use to bring those muscles back into balance: vitamin C, as recorded in Touch for Health, and also pantothenic acid, based on applied kinesiology knowledge. And then in the allergies course, we talk about other ways to balance out adrenal function as well, to bring that up into balance in order to deal with the numerous allergies. Now, in the particular, I took a class quite a number of years ago. This is from a particular branch of kinesiology. I won't mention which one, from a top kinesiologist. At the start of the class, the instructor said, all allergies are relationship issues, and all we heard for 2 days was how to balance out relationship issues. And I felt really, well, I need to be quite polite, but I was a little bit peeved, as the British would say, because it's not that simple. All allergies are not relationship issues. There are numerous origins for allergies. If your vitamin C level is too low, that alone can create allergies. So in our 2-day class on sensitivities and allergies, we actually, when we have people that have numerous allergies and sensitivities, we look at about 17 different ways in which we can bring the body back into balance. If we're dealing with isolated allergens or sensitivities, then we take 8 individual approaches. Now, why do we have such an approach? Because if the only tool you have is a hammer, there's a tendency to go through life hammering everything in because you think everything is a nail. Whereas the reality is life is a little bit more complicated, and sometimes we need a saw to put our saw, a different tool to deal with the issue. So when we're dealing with sensitivities and allergies, if we're going to be able to address all the needs our clients have, then we need to have lots of different tools available. Some are emotionally based, some are related to energetics, some are nutritionally based. We have to, because there are different causes for allergies. And that's why we use the triangle of health. So we can use nutritional approaches. We can work with the emotions to balance out the allergies, and we can use Touch for Health, more physical type approaches, energetic approaches. Now you're wondering how people get into a class like this. One of my basic class is Success Over Distress. That's a 2-day class where we teach people how to work with emotions. Once they know how to work with emotions, then they can take a class such as Working with Emotions, where we have 53 different organ reflexes. We go through and find out 3 different ways in which organ reflex is priority and how to balance all the organs out with emotions. Then once people know how to do that, then we graduate into the nutritional testing class, where we look at how do we find out what nutrients the body wants, how do we determine whether the body can handle them, of these various nutrients the body needs, how do we determine what the priority is, how long they need to take it, what the best food sources are, etc. That's a foundational course, and then from there people can go into the sensitivity and allergies class, or they can go into overcoming addictions, energy management, advanced biokinesiology, digestive system, immune system, sleep, lots of other courses that also require the nutritional testing as a sensitivity. Now, I put this together because I just found out last week I was given this presentation, and I've just put my email address here because my current website doesn't have a working email link with it. So if anyone needs to contact me about that, that's my email address. But I'll close down now to answer any questions anyone might have.
Wonderful. Wayne, you make that which appears to be difficult easy. The way that you explain is you're just a master at what you do. And it's a joy to listen to every class where you're teaching. It's a joy to have you on Meet the Authors. It's a joy to hear you speaking at conferences. You just make sense. Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, Eleanor Graves has a question for Wayne. Is this an issue with cephalic pelvic disproportion for childbirth?
Sometimes when people are allergic to certain products, one of the tissues we have out of balance is the bulbar cavernosus muscle or tendon. That's in the pelvic floor. And that can sometimes be traumatized when a woman goes through childbirth. So there wasn't a problem earlier. They go through childbirth. That is then thrown out of balance, and then people can establish allergies as a consequence of that muscle or tendon being out of balance. Now, in that case, we have ways to balance that out with nutrition and emotions, even though it's initially caused by a childbirth disturbance. So that might be a parallel situation to what Eleanor was talking about. Tammy's question was, are any of my courses online? Most of my material I don't teach online because the complexity of the kinesiology. However, during COVID, I did teach some classes online, particularly in regard to the immune system into Hungary, Russia, places like that. So, I mean, if we go through another lockdown, then I will adapt things to teach online. But it's better to have people in class where they can actually have someone there that can supervise and give them pointers to improve the accuracy of the muscle testing. I have a question here. Also, was covered in advanced biokinesiology. I took my training from John Barton, and so biokinetic exercises, some of that material and the energy centers contains a lot of biokinesiology information. However, there's some material that I've still found useful from John Barton that doesn't appear in any of my classes. So I put it together into a class called Advanced Biokinesiology, where we look at a book called the Quick Ready Reference, which has 840 different tissues in. And so for example, if you have the heart out of balance, you can track down 1 out of 54 different muscle tendons or ligaments associated with the heart to put the heart organ and the meridian back into balance. That gives you an idea what's in the advanced biokinesiology.
Brilliant. Thanks, Wayne. Folks, this is our time that's done today. It's just wonderful to see you all here and to be together and to know that Meet the Authors, what we're doing is being supported. Wayne, any last words?
If you're interested, just look for the people that teach wellness kinesiology within your countries, because we have a lot of instructors in France, in Belgium, in Germany, in Ireland.
Thank you, everybody, for wherever in the globe around the world you came from. I look forward to seeing you. Good night.